Smoke has gotten worse over the eastern part of the United States, from the New England down to the Carolinas, northwestward to the Great Lakes. And it's not gonna break down anytime soon. At least we're doing it with temperatures that are mostly below average. Can you imagine if there was a heat wave going on right now? We're going to talk all about that, what's going on elsewhere tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. They've got mulch and topsoil and sand and anything else you need to make sure your home looks terrific. 631-756-1125. Nowhere can you find better prices. And the website is
Omni-True, excuse me, that must be the smoke, OmniTrueValue.com.
Oh, you took it up an octave. And Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing weather network on the planet. I am part of such a network. And the link, the referral link, is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. You can use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show for any of the purchases you make there, and you will get
a big 10% off.
From everything I've seen today, Joe, I don't know how folks are breathing through this. I saw pictures that were sent to me from friends in Pennsylvania. It looked like an overcast day. They said the air smelled like wet logs on a fire. And I've seen
everybody's using everybody who I've seen so far is giving their own description as to what it smells like out there. And somebody said in Pennsylvania it smelled like burnt pretzels.
All right, well, at least he picked an enjoyable food.
Yes.
But it's got to be terrible for folks who've got breathing issues to have to deal with this, and it's not going to change. I mean, we've got this northerly flow in the eastern part of the United States that's just going to keep bringing down. Seems to come down in waves. I noticed this morning when I looked at the satellite, it looked awful. And then during the day, there was sort of a little gap, one plume of smoke moving out. It was less hazy for a while in some places, but lo and behold, another big plume of smoke coming down. And, this is just going to go on for a while.
Well, I had been to Los Angeles. I was not there in the 1970s. However, one of our folks on the chat board, David Schwartz, mentioning that the air looks like Los Angeles in the 1970s, brown haze all the way to the ground. And thank you also, David, for hitting Super Chat, first one out of the box tonight. Yes, it does look kind of. I had said right after dinner, I looked out the window. I said, "Is that fog?" And Renato was chiding me. He said, "No, stupid, that's not fog. That's what we've been looking at and talking about all day. That's the smoke." And indeed,
such a loving adjective.
Well, I deserved it. I deserved it. I mean, what else could it have been? Obviously, it couldn't have been fog, but it looked like fog. That's how thick the stuff is out there.
Now, seriously, can you imagine if we were under the upper air would be different, so we wouldn't maybe not have as much smoke if we were sitting under a big ridge, because the upper flow in Canada would be different. But can you imagine if you combine this?
Wait a minute. Renato wants to clarify. He said, "I did not say that." No, I was just, all right.
You were embellishing.
I was embellishing. Yes. Yes, indeed.
You wanted to make her sound worse than she really is.
Well, I'm just made some delicious cheesecake.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you had it before you did the show.
I had a little bit of it before the show. I have a feeling that unless I'm nice now for the rest of the evening, I may not see that cheesecake again. Or if I do see it, it's not going to see in my mouth. It's let him dance out of this, folks.
Right. New Brunswick, Canada guy says Quebec Premier said today that not enough resources to fight over 150 fires in Quebec. They said they will just simply have to let the fires burn in the north until they burn out.
Johnny Quest, who also has hit the chat board, thank you, Johnny, says, if you get a minute or two, can you look at the satellite loop over Canada, which we will
Of
look
course we will. So why
to
don't you
see,
why
to
don't
see
you
if there's any rain for this for that area.
all right, so why don't you start you've got the smoke map, for lack of a better uh, you know
Yes.
title. So why don't you go ahead and start with that, and I will see what kind of satellites I can dig up.
And all of you can call this map up for yourself. This is at firesmoke.ca. I said that means it is probably a Canadian. I think it's a Canadian site. But let me just share it with all of you so you can get a look at it yourself. You can get a whiff at it. Indeed. Take a look at the view here, and you can see what we're looking at. Now, basically, the darker the shade of orange or even brown, the worse the air is, the worse or the thicker the haze is. And if we zoom in here in the New York metropolitan area, you can see I can actually stop this too. Let me just actually go back. And there's a clock. There's a time scale here in the lower left. You can see here. So this is as of 4 p.m. this afternoon. Actually, wait a minute. Yeah. No, actually, this is for June. Yeah, June the 6th, 4 p.m. This is Eastern time. And it gives you a legend here of how bad the air or how thick the haze or the smoke is. The lightest shade is 1 to 10 parts per million. And I'm not sure precisely what UG/M cube is, but basically the bottom line of it is the darker the shade of orange or brown, the worse it gets. This was as it was as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. So as we move through time here, and actually it would appear, at least based upon this computer model, that by 9 o'clock, the haze will have thinned appreciably. In fact, after midnight tonight, 12 a.m., June 7, you could see we're at the bottom end of the scale here, 1 to 10 parts per million. And you say to yourself, oh, things are getting better. It's going to be okay. But as we move into tomorrow, here we go again. 7 a.m. tomorrow, we're back up to 28 to 60 parts per million. And we remain in that category. Look at that big area of orange here. It gets even worse. Here in the lower Hudson Valley, this is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So tomorrow, if this is correct, 24 hours from now, at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on June the 7th, we will be in the range of 60 to 120 parts per million in terms of haze and in terms of smoke. And if we continue with that, we could see that with time, it kind of ebbs and it kind of flows. That's the best way to describe it. We're in it, and then we're out of it, and then we're in it again. But it looks like, Joe, we're going to stay in this pattern. This is the last. This is as of 6 p.m. on June the 8th. That would be for Thursday. But look at all this stuff up here. This is where it's all coming from. This is the where all the smoke is emanating from. I saw it this afternoon. 162 separate wildfires going on up in Quebec, Canada. And as you can see, it's so long as the airflow comes from the north and sweeps that air down into the Adirondacks and into the Catskills, the Hudson Valley, and point south. So long as we maintain that north to south flow and all of this stuff up here, we're going to remain in this pattern for probably another few more days. And so I'm sorry to say that, but that's how it looks right now.
We have to get the upper air winds to go southwest. That is not going to happen until we get this upper low, this storm in Nova Scotia and the upper low out of the way, and that's not going to happen until later Friday. Maybe by Saturday it'll be gone. I'm trying to. I got the Canadian loop, and thanks Johnny for hitting a super chat. By the way, most appreciated as always. Um, but here's the loop of Canada. You can see the northern half of the United States. I added the borders on it, and the latitude and longitude. Trying to get this thing to go faster. I try to get I try to increase the speed, but it doesn't seem to be working very well. But you see that the storm in eastern Canada is such a dominating feature here. I mean, it's just sitting here, and it's not moving east. It's basically just doing a bit of a counterclockwise loop. And if you look at the flow and the movement of the clouds, I mean, there's a northeast to north wind that comes around from Labrador and then goes all the way down the eastern seaboard. And and what follows, if you look in Ontario province, south of Hudson Bay, that's the smoke that is streaming southward into the eastern lakes and then swinging southeastward across New York State and Pennsylvania and even getting down into the Carolinas. The other thing I noticed, Joe, you look at Hudson Bay, okay, that white area that covers the bay itself, that's not cloud cover. I mean, I mean, it's either ice or fog. I mean, it's still I haven't looked at an ice map, so I don't know if that's ice or fog.
Well, we're not too deep into, and it's not officially summer yet, although meteorological summer began a few days ago on the 1st of June. But I'm looking here on the chat board, and one of our people here, um, James Davidson, writing, the pattern is locked in. Today in Jackson, New Jersey, we had another brush fire. And since we're seemingly surrounded by these fires, we can't seem to win either way. I mean, it's weird. And the other weird thing was that I was awakened rudely this morning. Well, Ron and I were awakened rudely this morning at about 8 o'clock this morning by some loud, sharp cracks of thunder. And I know we were talking about the possibility of showers and thunderstorms today, though albeit widely scattered. You figured, they would be after the atmosphere warms up, but no, it was already happening over our house at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, there was a very small batch moved over you, and then it moved over Long Island and offshore, and then during this afternoon, another couple of clusters of thunderstorms developed, and then I've gotten reports from friends of mine on Long Island that they got some hail out of it as it went on by. And in fact, if you look, you could see the lightning flashes. So this is the visible with the lightning flashes, and you see them crossing Long Island here. We'll look on a tighter shot in a moment. The other thing I just want to point out too is that there is a storm up in northwest Canada, right in here. There's a rotation there up in northwest Canada that is moving very slowly to the east. But the problem is with that big low that is sitting in Nova Scotia and not moving, that storm's not going to be able to go east very far. Maybe it'll try to take a dive southeastward at some point. So we'll see how the models resolve this. But here's a close-up. Let's just go close up on the northeast. And again, you see the lightning flashes here as the storms develop this afternoon. And now there's the batches offshore. There's storms that came down in northeastern New York, moving into the upper Hudson Valley. They seem to be past their peak intensity now because the lightning flashes are beginning to disappear. So eventually, once we get past sundown, a lot of this stuff is going to be gone. But look at the smoke. I mean, it's crazy. And you see there's like a gap in between there across Pennsylvania on a diagonal. That's what I saw earlier on the satellite. You get these gaps where one plume of smoke goes through, and then it's not as bad, and then another heavy plume comes in, and that's what's over northeast PA, northern New Jersey, Long Island, most of New York State, most of southern and central New England. It's not good.
The one thing I'd like to point out also on Sunday concerning the thunderstorms. You remember on Sunday we pointed out that SPC had much of the Northeast in general thunderstorm coverage, but we were talking about how that upper low, that cold pool of air, in some situations can generate gusty winds and also small or pea-sized hail. And I made the comment on Sunday. I said, well, as they get closer to this event, I'm sure that upon considering this more and more, that they will probably include within that zone at least marginal risk, if maybe not slight risk. Up until this morning, they still had general thunderstorm coverage, but I guess because they had begun seeing that stuff popping every which way in the early part of the day today, at the midday update, and Joe just brought it up here, you can see now within that zone of general thunderstorm coverage, they actually did indeed upgrade to a marginal risk of severe weather, and I would agree 100% fully with what we have seen with the hail in parts of our tri-state area. I mean, I think, quite frankly, they should have done it earlier, but they finally did put it up, and it worked. Although, again, we saw this, Joe, 2 days ago.
Yeah, well, they probably, my understanding is that the cable was out and they weren't able to, get the live stream the last couple of days. So they weren't able to, watch the Joe and Joe weather show like they usually do. While I got the map up, we've got marginal risk in the Carolinas. We've got a small. It's all marginal risks everywhere. There's no mechanism really to drive a widespread severe weather event, so that's a plus at least. Marginal risk in parts of South Florida, Southwest Texas, and also in a good chunk of the state of New Mexico. And we've got marginal risk thanks to an upper low off the West Coast shooting energy up northward, and they have a marginal risk from northwestern Utah, southern Idaho, across northern Nevada, northeastern California, much of northern California, I should say, and southernmost Oregon, southernmost Idaho. So that's for today. And since I got the maps up, I might as well just keep going. Now, tomorrow, again, it's marginal risk areas, which basically means isolated severe thunderstorms. I don't know that any of these are going to be upgraded beyond that. Tornado risk is less than 2% in all areas, so it's mainly wind and in some places hail, but marginal in the Carolinas, the coastal areas anyway, and maybe 100 miles or so inland. Marginal along the east coast of Florida, marginal in West Texas and into eastern New Mexico, marginal from central Missouri northwestward up into eastern North Dakota, and again in the west, Idaho, Oregon, northwest Nevada, and northeastern California. Day 3, which now brings us to Thursday into Friday, uh, they've got general thunderstorms here. Now there's another spoke the last spoke that's going to come around on Thursday, and that might trigger off some scattered showers and thunderstorms. So they have general thunderstorm risk there for now. I haven't analyzed that yet to give them my opinion regarding Thursday. But marginal risk in South Georgia, northern Florida, western Montana, northern Idaho, and eastern Washington State. So this is what the radar looks like right now, and you see a couple of strong cells over Long Island that went through. My friend Mike Panici sent me a picture of the hail. Um, maybe I'll see if I can bring it up a little later. And you've got some storms moving off Cape Cod. The storms in the Middle Hudson Valley. There's a stray storm around, looks like east of Washington D.C., east of Baltimore, I should say. And then we go into the Midwest where we've got some showers around Indiana and Ohio, also back up into parts of Iowa. The West is getting, quite a bit. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here in the West with this upper low, particularly in California. When I looked at this earlier today, there was a lot of rain from San Francisco going halfway down the state, and now you've got this curl here, probably a little shortwave rotating around the upper low that's bringing some showers and downpours a little bit closer to LA. Not quite there, but getting there. But very busy out in the western part of the United States, and not as busy in the eastern part of the United States. And by the way, Joe, it was raining for much of the day in Maine, in eastern Maine, but that has, you know, kind of backed westward, and there's some dry gaps in between. The storm is not helping. The rain's not putting out any. It's not where the fires are. Let's put it that way.
Well, if you're up in northern Maine, northern and northeastern Maine, or down East Maine, that's one of the few spots in the Northeast which apparently is not being affected by the smoke or wildfire activity from Canada, from Quebec.
All right. Cioffi map tonight. There's your low, an 89 low, which for this time of year is pretty deep, sitting over Nova Scotia inland. And look, temperatures 50s and 40s up in New Brunswick and points northward into Labrador, so that cool air funneling down to some extent into northern New England and northern New York State. Here's the weak weather front that's coming through now with the shortwave, with a little low analyzed in eastern Massachusetts, front on the doorstep of New York City at 5 p.m., back into southern PA, and then swings down into southern Ohio and through Indiana and Illinois. In the southeast, it's nothing but weak high pressure. Had a really nice day today. Got up to, I think, 82 for my high. And had an inch of rain last night. We had a big thunderstorm roll through in the middle of the night. It was loud. Boy, was it loud. And there was even some wind with it as well. But definitely good for me because I needed the rain. And there's the rainfall forecast map for the next 7 days. Now, it does look like the next weather front, aside from whatever happens with any scattered stuff between now and Saturday and Friday, uh, I'm thinking, maybe Monday with that next weather front. And WPC is a little bullish with the rainfall to an extent, showing 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half, which I think would be welcome.
I think that Sunday, late Sunday into early Monday, will bring the best chance again of maybe not widespread, but kind of convective activity that could lead to, again, gusty winds and maybe even some hail. That's the most significant threat I could see. I mean, I'm not overlooking what SPC is suggesting for Thursday into Friday with the general thunderstorms. We may once again see that evolve into marginal risk. But some of this activity could, in some places, bring down quite a bit of rain in a rather short interval of time.
All right, let's see what the upper pattern has to say, because at the end of the day, this is what's really important with regards to the extent of the smoke. And you see here, folks, you got this really deep upper low. I mean, I look at this map, Joe, with amazement because it's June. And
Yeah.
to have an upper, the upper low is actually more impressive than the surface low. Got this deep upper low that's sitting there, and just look at where the flow is coming from. I mean, it's just endless. We need to get out of this, this northerly flow, or north or northwest, depending on your location. But as long as that upper low sits there, it just goes on and on and on. And of course, again, at least it's air that's cooler than normal overall, and not necessarily hot air, which would be far worse. But here we go. I'm moving this starting from tonight, okay? And that upper low is actually moving westward, so that's not good. And you see, there's still these spokes that are going around. Here's the last one that comes through on Friday. And I think, there's one that comes through on Thursday, sort of an east-west shortwave. So that, will there be some scattered storms with that? Possibly. And then Friday, with the last shortwave, there might be some scattered storms again, especially inland. Probably a better chance inland. And finally on Saturday, that thing gets out of the way. But we still have short waves dropping down through eastern Canada. Here's an upper low that drops down into the Great Lakes. This is where our break may come. Not so much on Saturday, but maybe Sunday when the winds aloft start to, go a little more southwest. Maybe we'll catch a break with the smoke on Sunday with an upper flow that's a little less favorable for the smoke to come down into the northeast.
It's not so much the fact that what we have here in the Northeast, but at the same time, California has that closed system over them, and that's what's making for an anomalous weather pattern for them. Because by this time of the year, by the time we get to June, it's all over in terms of moisture for California. Any significant rainfall, the rainy season is behind them. And let me tell you, folks, after what they went through this past winter with like what 9 or 10 or 12 what is now being referred to as atmospheric rivers. They've had more than their fair share of rain. And I'm sure a lot of them were probably saying, well, good, we're getting into May and June now. Everything will get shut off and we'll get into a nice, give us a chance to dry out. It ain't drying out. Not with that pattern, not with that situation in the Southwest. So we've got closed system out in the Southwest. We have that system over Nova Scotia. We've got another system that's trying to close off or is closed off over the northern Great Lakes. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It is really a crazy pattern.
Yep. Frank Scalera hitting super chat. Thank you, Frank, for hitting the tip jar tonight. Most appreciated. Well, finally, early next week, the California low opens up. The Great Lakes upper low swings eastward, and then that goes out to the east. See, this is at least it's better because at least things are moving. So that low goes out because the California low basically kicks it out, and then that replaces it, and then that comes along toward the end of next week, and then that moves out. And after that, it looks like some ridging starts to build. Maybe this will be, will give us a break around Father's Day weekend if this is the case, or actually it starts to do, yeah, it starts to build in during Father's Day weekend, and then the days that follow, and the flow from Canada behaves itself. So that maybe we'll catch a break out of this if this is right. And once again, by the way, for the I don't know how many runs in a row, the GFS spinning up some sort of tropical cyclone in the Caribbean in the long term. As always, said it yesterday. I'll just repeat it. We're not really going to pay any attention to anything with any degree of seriousness until we get to a place inside the shorter range. So you got a long way to go. So models could start. We're at that time of year where they're going to keep spinning stuff up, and more often than not, it's going to be fake. So here's our surface map going forward. Pretty much, Joe. I think we could agree that given the way things are not moving, the same places in the U.S. that are seeing shower and thunderstorm risks today are going to see them tomorrow, are going to see them Thursday, and they're going to see them Friday. If you've been dry through all of this, chances are, if you're, say, in the Eastern Lakes, uh, maybe the Northern Ohio Valley, uh, you haven't really seen much in the way of any kind of rainfall lately. Well, that'll probably continue as well because we got to get this upper low out of the way. And you see on Thursday we get all that instability inland, and then again Friday afternoon happens again, but then finally on Saturday, well even on Saturday now because the trough takes a little longer to go away, showing a little bit of scattered shower activity. Sunday opens up, and then on this model run of the GFS, and this kind of went with the European was slower. It really doesn't bring it doesn't really bring a front through here until later Monday with some showers and storms.
Right.
One of the things with these upper lows is the fact that if it does take an extra day to get out of the way, it's just slowing everything downstream. So maybe it just gets in here later.
Well, that's why I said for later, for later Sunday into Monday, that looks like the best shot of getting more organized convective activity, more organized shower and thunderstorm activity because of the front coming in. But we could have pop-ups again on Thursday. Hey, I'm not even ruling out the possibility we might have an isolated pop-up tomorrow. I mean, the odds are, probably only about 1 chance in 10, but somebody might still, with all of this upper air instability lingering, that there might be in the afternoon tomorrow a stray or renegade shower. Although, again, most of the day, if not all of it tomorrow, will be dry, and then we'll get back into that somewhat semi-unstable airflow again for Thursday into Friday.
I'm just looking at the European, which is even slower than the GFS. It doesn't have anything solid rain wise with the front until Monday night. So we'll have to resolve that tomorrow and Friday to see if the slower solution is going to be more correct. The European only goes out 10 days, and again doesn't show anything. Usually the European's pretty good at picking up these systems, and the GFS, as I said earlier, loves to spin them up. So let's see how this run handled it. Again, it comes out of the Southwest Caribbean, and there you see it, just kind of wobbles along through the Yucatan Channel, then takes a hook. On this run, it takes a hook straight to the left into Mexico, but who knows? And who knows if that's even real?
And I mean, this is why, those television outlets, those stations that show you a 10-day forecast, it's ridiculous. It's absurd, and it goes against. I mean, don't even. What can I say? I know that some of you, let's say when you have a major event like a graduation or a wedding or something, you're desperate 10 or 15 days out to try to see what the weather is like. I know I've felt that from time to time, but you're putting up a 10-day forecast day after day or night after night, that's doing a disservice to the viewing public. And 7 days is more than enough. And again, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I said, I wish we ought to go back to the 5-day forecast, because that's about as far out with any realm of daily credibility that we could provide for viewers in terms of weather forecasting.
Well, this is a time of year where this is May and June, June being a big wedding month. Uh, I always get messages from folks. I'm getting married, and then it'll be like 3 or 4 weeks away, and they'll say, "Well, I just looked on my app, and which goes out to 45 days, and it says that it's going to rain for the entire day on whatever the day is in June." And I just tell them, don't even waste your time looking at that stuff. First of all, it's going to change every 6 hours. There's no value. So just plan your wedding and check back with me when we're inside 10 days. And then we could, maybe start to speculate. But otherwise, you're wasting your energy and you're getting aggravated for nothing.
Right.
Okay.
Tom Contino, I have absolutely no clue why Rich Hoffman continues to show a mood index on his daily forecast. He says, I don't believe that mood is tied to weather. Why don't you email him or
ask him? Why are you asking us? Ask him.
And but you know what? Everybody in television, you need a gimmick. I mean, this goes back to that famous show Gypsy. In fact, you saw the movie with Rosalind Russell and
Natalie Wood.
Natalie Wood. You gotta have a gimmick. It's true. In television, you gotta have a gimmick. I'll tell you what, my gimmick in television in the summertime, I had the frizz factor.
Well, I was just going to say, Joe, the only useful thing as far as that is concerned is hair. I mean, hair is the most important thing in everyone's life. All right? My relationship with my colorist is sacred. So she dyes the gray in perfectly. So, yeah, ask him. Good God.
There used to be I would bring that up. I would use the frizz factor, which I had been doing since my radio days. And then when I did it on News 12, then they started, they being the powers that be, they started asking my colleagues, Rob Eisenson, Bryson Van Eck, they said, well, Joe Rayo gives us a frizz factor. Why don't you? And I felt bad for them because, it was my own thing. And it was something that I made specifically for my presentations. I know Rob and Bryson really didn't want to use it or whatever like that. And they didn't try. I said, look, cool it. I mean, people want the frizz factor. They'll come and watch in the afternoon, evening when I'm on or whatever like that. You don't have to deal with that. And I didn't even name it the frizz factor.
Well,
I called it the humidex or the discomfort factor. And it was Jim Kerr at WPLJ who, in talking a bit about it, saying, so in other words, you're talking about days that are bad for hair or frizzies or whatever. And
Right.
that's how we ended up calling it the frizz factor. So there's the frizz factor. Rich Hoffman has a mood index. Ask Rich why he calls
Now,
it
you know what? A smart marketer would have gotten you Clairol for your sponsor.
a. No, but on a completely different subject. I mean, I used to do the weather in Rhode Island with a guy who was the dean of Southern New England talk radio, Sherm Strickhauser, and just one, we had a calendar. You remember those word of the day calendars that was hanging on the wall? And one day, we had nothing to talk about weather-wise. So I said, "Oh, you want to know what the word of the day is?" And I gave him the word that was on the calendar, and he gave me the definition from the calendar. Well, the next day he said, "So what's the word of the day? What's the word of the day?" To make a long story short, that became such a part of the weather on my weathercast for like 88 years. The radio station actually ended up sponsoring the word of the day. And they were making money off of that. It was just something that, you know,
If you could sell it.
if you could sell it, and indeed, and we had all kinds of people, Joe. We had people on that Rhode Island show, WHJJ in Providence, Rhode Island. We had the mayor of Rhode Island, the governor, for God's sake, of Rhode Island, playing the word of the day, and probably the most colorful character who played it with Sherman and myself, Sergeant Slaughter, the pro wrestler. He was on one morning with
Oh,
Sherman.
really?
And so Sergeant, yeah, give me the word of the day. It was crazy. It was weird. And I said to myself, how did this start? But again, you're absolutely right. Somebody who's very good in promotions, or being able to think fast on their feet, they can sell. You could sell anything on radio, and they were able to sell word of the day. Who knows? Maybe at News 12, maybe if they had a smarter promotions department, they might have been able to sell the Frizz Factor. The Frizz Factor tonight is brought to you by
by Clairol
by Clairol
or Head and Shoulders shampoo or any of the other ones that are out there. But you know what? We have our own version of word of the day, which is every bit as popular, if not more popular.
Briller Jeopardy.
That's right. We have Briller Jeopardy, and you have it tonight. So let's play along with our studio audience and see where this adventure takes us.
I'm going to go right now to pick up the word of the day that was given to me by, not the word of the day, the Briller Jeopardy thing, by Mr. Scott Briller. And Joe, hi, on this Briller Jeopardy, what is the average high temperature in the month of June for the following 5 cities? And we will start, ladies and gentlemen, with OKC, Oklahoma City. What do you think the average high temperature in the month of June is at Oklahoma City, Joe?
Well, Dallas yesterday was 93, as I recall. So I'm going to say 90.
You will say 90. Okay.
Right.
And we have Frank Riccio saying 86. Anthony Spiraccio hitting it on the nose at 88 degrees.
88. I was trying to decide, should I go 89 or 90 or 91, and I split the difference. So, all right, 88.
How about Orlando, Florida?
I will say for June, I will say 91.
And you hit it, along with New Brunswick, Canada guy, 91 in Orlando.
And Trish Spiraccio hit it too. And Rosemarie Osborne was only short by 1.
Yes.
And Kenneth Rosenberg was thinking low temperature, so he said 76.
All right. And number 3 now. I know a shortcut through Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. Oh God. 80. 84.
Oh!
Should have said 83.
Michael Azara hit 83, and he was right. So
yeah.
Michael hit it. A lot of people coming up with 87, 85.
I was trying to decide 83 or 84, and I went 84. Well, that's close. I missed by 1.
Now here's one that'll have you thinking. Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, that's a tough one. I know. Oh God, is it a triple digit? I'll say June 1st to July 1st. I'll say 101.
A silly millimeter longer. We had somebody on the chat board who came within one of the high. That was Mr. Cardillo.
What did he say?
He had 103.
103. So it's either 102 or 104.
Yes.
So Patrick Darcy said 104.
And Patrick Darcy is right.
Okay, so it's 104.
Finally, the Steel City, Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh?
Yes.
All right, so Philadelphia was 83. So I will say 82.
Not quite.
Okay. Northern Grace said 85. Paul Roman says 85. Kenneth Rosenberg says 81. Rosemarie Osborne 87. Bunch of folks with 85s. 82 for Christinapedia.
Patrick Darcy is on the right road with 77.
77. So what is it, 79?
79.
79. I was trying to decide to go. I know I wanted to go a little lower than Philadelphia, but I didn't know how low to go.
Yeah. So there you are.
Well, we learn. We learn on the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
Exactly.
Right? Trying to think if there's anything exciting that happened to me today. No, my landscaper finally showed up and cleaned my weeds out of my yard. So that means I have to start my little wall project maybe tomorrow. So we'll see if I do that. And no, not much else. JJ's asleep on the floor like he usually is during the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
Well, it's nice to be a dog and be able to sleep.
It is, no
Yes.
question. All right. Well, on that note, let's say a goodbye and at least remind everybody that the Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow, the revolutionary Tempest weather system. You can get that and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. They also have a lot of other weather electronics and gadgets and gizmos and widgets and good old weather fashion if you want to get clothes that will let everybody know. Actually, it might not be a good idea to do that because weather people are not exactly in favored status right now in society.
Yeah.
For political reasons. But if you do, use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show. The link's at the top of the chat board and on the description of the live stream. Use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show and you get 10% off. And also our friends at Omni True Value Hardware, place to go this spring to get everything you need to make sure your home looks great, mulch, topsoil, sand, and anything else. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com. And thank you again to Johnny Quest, David Schwartz, and Frank Scalera for hitting the Joe and Joe tip jar for tonight.
We will see you all again tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Nighty night.
Good night, folks.
And we're done.
Yes.
Good.